The infrastructure of this area has changed dramatically in the intervening years, but this was the link between the West Dock bungalows and the Springhill housing estate. Where I was trying to make my way would have been maybe 100 yards in that direction, an entry running up the back of the West Dock bungalows. I was making my way towards the Springhill housing estate. It would only have been a matter of maybe 200 yards, but it was the most dangerous 200 yards I've ever faced in my life.
The night the shootings happened, I was sitting playing handball outside the front of my house. It was around 9 o'clock, a nice sunny evening. Me and a couple of friends were playing handball outside our house. We noticed 3 guys coming out of the house behind us, getting in their car and taking off towards the bungalows. And as they reached the first bungalow, the car slowed up when another car came towards it. And the 2 cars stopped beside each other, and the occupants of the car started talking to each other. As the car stopped, that's when the shooting started. The 2 cars were riddled with bullets, and we seen one of the guys in the car falling out of the side of the car.
All of a sudden, I got shot. You know, I mean, it just went sort of blank. I don't know exactly what happened, you know, but I was laying there on the street. Bullets was chipping around my head, you know, and as I say, when I was laying there, you know, I was sort of in a trance. I didn't know exactly what happened. I felt drunk, you know, and it wasn't until later on that maybe a couple of weeks later, when I woke up in the hospital, people told me that I was shot through the back of the head, and there was so many of my friends and neighbours was shot dead, you know. Couldn't believe it. I still can't believe it, you know.
Against the advice of adults who were in safety and who were in cover and were shouting at me to get back, but in the blind panic, I kept running, kept moving. I only had one thought in my head: to make my way home, because I had a thought in my head: my parents will be extremely worried for my safety. Shots did ring out as I tried to cross the gap. I was too small, too fast on my feet. I thank God for it, because I just would have been another one of the casualties, another person accused in the wrong. This would be about the distance here. And the gap in the houses, just between the 2 blocks of houses in Springhill, you couldn't get any further because the snipers were shooting from Curry's timber yard, firing rapidly, shooting at anything that even remotely moved.
The same with young fella Dougal. He was shot trying to get the guys in the car that night. They were trying to crawl to the cars, but the crossfire was that heavy that night. He was shot dead that night as well. At that, the priest came on the scene for Fitzpatrick, and he asked could he get anybody to take him across the cars. Well, it happened my father volunteered to try and get him across the cars. So we went up the entries between the houses in Springhill and tried to cut across into the bungalows.
I stayed in cover and was joined by one adult man, a neighbour who would have lived in this row of houses, in the old Springhill houses, a Mr. Butler. I think he had been in the community centre, the usual Sunday afternoon gathering of the people in the community centre, and when they heard the shots, it all just began so quickly. Like myself, they were trying to get to safety, they were trying to get home, but then we thought about how do we help our neighbours who are lying shot, dead or wounded. In the gap he and I stood together. He was on my right. And we were looking over at the bungalows, and one of the wounded Brian Paddy crew, they were trying to get him into shelter to give him some aid because he was badly wounded. And at that point we were joined by Father Fitzpatrick, the local curate, who was running from the direction of the church, and he was in full priestly garb. He took a handkerchief out of his pocket, a white handkerchief, and he stood to my left. Mr. Butler was to my right. Mr. Butler put his head forward slightly. Father Fitzpatrick put his head forward and put the handkerchief out. And there was a distinctive crack of the British Army rifle. Very, very loud, very distinguishable. And Father Fitzpatrick's body fell back towards me and then fell forward again. At the same time I was conscious of Mr. Butler, who had fallen to my right. They were taller than me, and it was the one shot that killed both. It had passed through Father Fitzpatrick's head and into the head, shoulder area of Mr. Butler. I think both of them were killed instantly. And in shock for a few seconds I stood and looked at their bodies on the ground. Stood with my back against the wall in horror at what had happened. And another individual, D. McCaffrey, he had been there and he tried to get to their bodies, and he too got shot and killed. There were a number of wounded and killed, and obviously rumours were spreading, and throughout the night I heard about a young girl who was the same age as me, a girl I'd played with in the street by the name of Margaret Gargan, where she had been sitting innocently on a garden wall and had been struck down.
Okay. We were sitting outside Leslie's door and sitting talking, and Margaret came running up from the community centre. We were just standing talking, and then they were shooting like from cars, but we never thought anything, so we were just sitting talking. And next thing I was pulled in, we heard the shot. I was pulled in and Lizzie was pulled in, and Margaret was lying there on the ground. That's really all I can remember. It just happened that quick, but that's where they were shooting from cars. At night there were shots being fired, and that's where they were coming from cars. So everybody panicked. I think they were trying to get Margaret off the ground, but they couldn't move because they were shooting. They kept shooting at anything that moved that night from Curry's wall.
Well, when I get shot through the head, and paralysed me up the right hand side. My eyes, whatever part of the head it hit me, you know, at the back of the head, my eyes has been very, very poor. As a matter of fact, they've told me I'm partially sighted. You know.
Well, it put a hell of a lot of pressure on my mother. My mother was left to rear 6 children. The oldest was 14. She had to basically go out and try and keep 6 kids. She got compensation from the government, but that turned out to be only £800. £800 doesn't seem a whole lot to rear 6 kids on. Each one of the kids were each awarded £80 each. And it doesn't seem a lot for a life to be taken away for each of us to be awarded £80 each. I was only 13 at the time when my father was shot dead. So I had to go up a hell of a lot quicker than I normally would. I just turned 13. It was a hell of a shock to me. It wrecked my head for years afterwards.
I was never asked once about what happened. I was never counselled about what happened. And it was 27 years later, in 1999, when the people set up their own investigation into the slaughter, that I was able for the first time in my life to talk publicly about that slaughter and about the impact it had in my life, because it was probably the most significant life transition I've ever gone through. And it's given me an insight into how fragile we were living in this area and how expendable we were living in this area, that our lives counted for very little.
People doesn't understand, you know, the things that goes through your mind, you know. I've been going through, from 1972, it's gone through my mind that people was killed because of me. You know, people that was going out for to do a mercy mission to help me when I was shot, and they were all murdered. The priest that wanted to give me the last rites, and they knew he was a priest, they murdered him, and they murdered, as I say, the man that lived facing me.
What we heard of the inquest, that the RUC and the British Army thought Forrest was Paddock and my father was a sniper. It's completely wrong, but my father was a family man, 38-year-old, 6 kids. No way he was in anything. He'd never had any Republican beliefs or anything like that. Our family's not been involved in anything like that. I've never heard anything from the RUC in the 28 years till this day. They've never come near me once. They've never come near my family once about this incident.
My sister-in-law, I was speaking to her one day, and she says to me that you know what I mean, you want to come into the nowadays because you're still in 1972. Well, I says to her, you know, like, I might be in the past, but it's up to date the way I feel, you know, because I'm left with the physical scars and the mental scars of what happened.
Should be something done about it, like. She was only a child. There were light in front of her. Just shouldn't have happened. There was a lot of people getting shot. Priests and all, like. They're just shooting at anything that moved that night. They were walking, they shot at you. And like, she was standing there, like, I must have knew she was only a child. Where they were shooting from, like, I knew where they were shooting at.
It's a memory that's imprinted. It's a memory that I don't want to forget, but it's certainly something that I want to see justice done about. Because innocent people were slaughtered. And until that kind of tragedy and that kind of slaughter is investigated and dealt with, people can't begin to truly heal. In this new political arrangement, we now have the opportunities to try and start that healing, and that's what I look forward to.